Dear friends, I'm going to give you a lecture as a Doctor of Philosophy on the role of the elite universities all around the globe in dismembering the globe and our prospects and all of our children's prospects. And I am a Doctor of Philosophy and I feel really well equipped to talk about that now. I'm going to play you some music. I've already done some of that on the previous ownership of a land called America. Let me now introduce you to the new owners. And this is a joke when you look at the lyrics about the sun god who used to declare who the owners of every country on our beautiful globe were before we launched armies and religions to make the gods in the skies a subsidiary of the world ownership issue now. Yeah, a very minor part of world ownership, and for 2000 years or so that has been a massive philosophical and theological joke for the owners of the world, who are the people who are currently the benefactors of the human conditions. They will very soon become the people who are very, very ashamed of their history and what they have done to the world and all of its indigenous peoples. So this was the tune that is launched the new ownership in America by the world's freemasons and a massive profiteering and warmongering cabal. I'm going to take my hat off because I'm ashamed of all of that now. The new owners. So that's the ramparts streaming with the original owner's blood. It is really not funny. Let's take you a little bit further back into the story and how we could potentially have freed the world if the people were prepared to rise up. And that the arrows were not actually the 5 arrows, but they were used to defend the country against the tyrants, like the fairy stories tell us. It's lovely. It's the nothing to say joke, Nottingham Forest. And Lisbon is in Spain, where some of the contenders for the British throne used to be. Portugal. So that's a mill in Sherwood Forest, and all of it is a massive piss take, because at the time when the Robin Hood movies were made, our armies were already in the Holy Lands brutalising them. That's ours, the British armies, and armies from all across Europe after they had finished with the Inquisition. But my timeline's maybe a little bit twisted. Right then, what else have we got to declare on our philosophical transcript? Oh, it's gone all locked up all of a sudden. Oh, here we go.
For a pretty powerful quartet. On the ice, Jamie Soleil and David Peltier.
This is the aim joke and the Peltier joke. about the American Indians 180 years or so after almost all of them had been culled by the US cavalry and all of the people in the cowboy hats. They talk about people who get persecuted in the Indian nation under treasonous leaders who are called President Wilson, and the characters that are mentioned by this guy, before they cover it up with innocent skaters and actresses, all of the names are in American history as a cover for the genocidal President Nixon in the 1970s. And Hayley Westenra, when she gets drawn into this by George W. Bush, is only 18 to 19 years old. And she sings about getting God to give New Zealand his blessings. I wish that would happen, and I hope it happens really quickly, because the mortals are the gods and the emperors, even in Australasia as we speak.
And they are joined on stage as we bring back the great Andrea Bocelli, and he is joined by 18-year-old rising star Hayley Westenra.
But the main theme is going to be Putnam, the little bastard that runs the media empire, that makes the jokes about the Chariots of Fire. And let me show you those jokes again. Putnam, you've heard of him, I think. There is the genocidal Nixon with Pompidou. That is the armies of people that run the whole world for its narcotics wealth, policed entirely by NATO, yeah, and profited from by Jackie O's second husband. Our third partner was in the diamond scams. All of it is a massive crime against the people, and I've just tried to disconnect myself from J Paterson, who, when he's getting the benefits of my wisdom, is quite happy to soak it up and make videos about it. This morning he has attempted to demonize North Korea again. Yeah, that's the Korea that these bastards took over, yeah, like the whole of the South Pacific. And that's the J Paterson that tells me in almost every video I make that he and I are compassionate guys. Yet he's just a plant, and I will explain how the plants work to dismember the world systematically in a really clever philosophical plan, yeah, involving the world's armies and involving the brutalization of all of the innocent people all over the globe. But I'm going to take you now straight into philosophical issues. Let me just scan down this so we can see Putnam in the modern day criminal context. It may not move very quickly because they're all very embarrassed by what's happening, and all they can do, here we go, here's the team, the Olympics team, the Chariots of Fire scandal, and the jokes about our war dead and the Anzac war dead. And there's the little bitch, which is Gordon Bowden's nomenclature for people that are kinda evil. Yeah, she's extremely well informed, and she understands the gravity of the war crime sins, which is why she resigned. That's Quentin Bryce. She resigned because I exposed Mr. Bean as the war correspondent in the genocidal Gallipoli campaign. Yeah, and there's the Blackadder team, who are already quaking in their boots because, like Nick Clegg and this little Jewish guy who used to be an Olympic athlete but is now a profiteer with Princess Anne on the Olympic panels, with the director at Manchester United and all of the scamsters, including the sweaty Irishman Martin Sorrell. And there is the Blackadder joke at the opening of the London Olympics about the killing of all of the Anzac troops. That's Mr. Bean's actor Rowan Atkinson, and the crimes of the Time Team are equally grave. And everybody ends up in a grave because everybody in the university sector is really philosophical about all of this. which takes us to the more ancient Putnam crimes in the philosophy sector, and I'm going to read you the whole story from Cornell University's electronic web page about how philosophical one is about driving our world into chaos, driving our world leaders into pinstripe suits and wearing the iconic cowboy hats, so you can take the piss out of everything that you do to the indigenous peoples that God chose as the leaders of that country. That's the Indian nation. Yeah, son of Paleface. Horses are all over the story, as we always see, and there's the Phrygian for a laugh cowboy hat that unites the underworld and the secret societies that run everything in a very philosophical way. Right, I'm going to close. Putnam's Monthly. Okay, it's an American literature, science and art outlet, and it's from the poshest universities in their country. I cannot get it to open. I'm going to have to close these things systematically because they're very ashamed of what they do. And they're still doing it today, and it is pathetic. There is no one prepared to reveal the truth. Right, let's just close that musical section down. There's the pictures of Bob Hope and all of the places that they brutalise. They laugh about it all over the South Pacific. Yeah, that's why I'm angry with Paterson. He claims to be a compassionate man. He acknowledges that nothing ever changes, and when I reveal the horrible truths about that, he has a laugh about it. He laughed at the Maswich jokes about the training of young kids aged 5 by the man who was the head of BBC Light Entertainment and the Zionist empire that imposes the death camp concepts on them, and all of the jokes about Teddy Roosevelt in World War II and all of the profiteering campaigns. And Maswich is a profiteer and the head of the BBC, which is why the evangelists in this sector that are profiting from it and are stealing from the world's people, yeah, including those in North Korea who never get a life. Their neighbours in Vietnam get a massive genocide that Nixon's involved in, yeah. And LBJ comes the biggest hero in that era, okay. And there's Bing Crosby, the war profiteer. Everywhere they go, they steal from it and they now own it entirely. Yeah, that's the John Paterson that is admiring of my insight. He now knows that I know about his whole life, and I now understand the weight loss issues that he's a victim of. Yeah, they think they're ever so clever and they try and intimidate you all of the time. Yeah, I will not have a bar of it. I tell everybody the facts, and then everybody has to climb down ever so gently until they take me out. And if John Paterson wants to try that, then I welcome his attempts. Yeah, it's amazing how people are prepared to betray the whole of the life that they pretend to be living. Yeah, the whole of their life. Yeah, they just give it up for a fast buck, and no one is allowed to have a competent government or an upstanding society that is capable of funding itself. Now, it's a tragedy, and the name I keep using is Quisling. That's a Norwegian term. Right, let's see if we can find the tab with the Putnam stuff on it. Okay, so here we've got what I want to tell you, the whole thing. So it's posh, it's in Latin, it's a philosopher's outlet, and what you've got is the writing of this is under a pseudonym. Yeah, so the Latin title to show you that we're dealing with the elite secret societies that like to know themselves as the Know Nothings, the Nottingham Notting Hill joke that is shared in Hollywood by the Zionists, and I want to show you the legitimacy of the university, in inverted commas, that launches this massive fraud against the world's people. It's Cornell in this case, and there's their logo, there's the website. You should visit it. This is the Putnam, yeah, the Putnam's monthly magazine of American literature, science and art. Ever so posh, and they've got the explorers tools, yeah, and they've got the capacity to pretend that they are trying to help the civilized world, because after all they are philosophers. It's a massive fucking piss take, but I must stop swearing because I do not sound civilized then, and I sound a wee bit aggressive, which I got with Paterson this afternoon because he keeps pulling the defend Christianity from the Zionist stories and all of the stories about the brutalisation of Southeast Asia out of the bag, and he pretends that those countries are a threat to the G8 and the G20. The man is not an idiot, he's a greedy propagandist, and his whole life is a lie. Unless he's just poorly informed and has been led into it by the propagandists that he follows in the ABEL DANGER movement, who use also the coding system that we see there. Yeah, everything they publish is coded, including my stuff. I asked them not to code it because I'm quite happy to trade under my own name. I have nothing to hide away in the secret society. Okay, they met in Nottingham this last week. John Paterson was there, Field McConnell was there, all of the people that I'm aware of on Skype were there, with one exception. She failed to show up for the interview last night after all of my pre-publicity on helping her with her familial issues. But the woman is highly stressed, and that is understandable. Being attacked by her controller online this afternoon, so I've unfriended them until they cool down, and I've written a letter to them and to Noam Chomsky and the former presidential candidate in the area that is Minesota, so that everybody knows exactly what I'm doing and saying, and that I am a pacifist and I will not stop working until the world is peaceful and prosperous again. Okay, I'm going to read you now all of what we learn about the secret societies and the know-nothings. I'll get through as much as I can. So it's the digital library at Cornell Edu, at digital.library.cornell.edu, and what you need to do is to look up the Putnam's monthly magazine, yeah, and what you then need to know is to look for is secret societies and the know-nothings. And it's quite spooky how God immediately directed me straight to this site. I was quite shocked by the involvement of the universities in the far early phases of my research on all of this, but I now totally understand all of it. And Otago University are involved as well in this story, as I told you, in the life of the man who wrote the novels about the Indians and their culling and the 5 Six Nations rugby jokes. Okay, secret societies, the know-nothings. We think the historians in general have scarcely made sufficient account of the influence of secret societies on human affairs. They have written elaborately of the external events of history, of the rise and fall of dynasties, of the migrations of races, of political changes, of victories and defeats, of the philosophy, the arts, the literature, the manners and the customs of nations. They have also dwelt with circumstantial accuracy upon the fortunes of great men, their precocious youth, their mature splendour, and their final mistakes and martyrdom. But the workings of those mysterious organisations, which as much as anything else have controlled the movements of society, they have treated only incidentally as they chance to be involved in larger movements. That's globalism, and without that careful research and comprehensive philosophy, which their importance seems to demand. Sorry, I've just lost my credentials. Let me just remind you that I got my degree for free. I got all of my degree entirely for free. In America, it has cost you the whole of your life in debt for 50 years or so. Our stuff was only imposed on British students from 1995, which is why Lord Patton is in the ITU, or is already beyond the grave. He's the boss at the BBC, so they do not think it fit to let that news out. Okay? Yet no phenomena in history have been more constant or more powerful in their effects, though not always flagrant or even apparent, than the operations of these secret brotherhoods. From the earliest times and among every people with which we are acquainted, they have not only existed but exerted considerable influence over the developments of humanity. Among the oldest monuments of social life, carrying us back into the debatable land which hovers between a misty mythology and a scarcely less misty traditional history. That's the Arthurian legends written by the Pope. Yeah, a series of popes in the clouds, of which men swell into the proportions of demigods. That's the joke in the American national anthem about the sun coming up, and it is the boulevard joke that got Sheryl Crow her cancer, and the reformer, the civilizer, the thinker and the poet take shape in the excitable imaginations of their followers of celestial divinities in the rude hieroglyphics. Yeah, I'm going to lose a lot of my audience because this is really posh, and it is what brutalised the world over and over again. And pictures of the Egyptian pyramids in the Orphic legends, which antedate the civilization of Greece. In the Cabirian rites of Samothrace, we find traces of certain mystic associations which were spread over vast empires, gathering into their shadowy folds the wisest men of the day, teaching through symbols the most exalted sentiments, and depositing, for the most part, the seeds of a superior social order. Yeah, that's the Tories, Conservatives, and they used to be the Whigs before the Indian genocide occurred in America, and they used to be the Whigs in Britain before the Cromwellian revolutions, and everything is a belly laugh as long as you kill the ordinary and innocent people. And in each subsequent age, from the Eleusinian and other mysteries of Greece and the Bacchanalia of Rome, that's the Bacchus, the strong drinker that likes the orgies, through the Disciplini Arcani of the earlier Christians, the Odinic priesthood of Scandinavia, the Druids, the Freemasonry, the Monachism, the Rosicrucianism, the knighthoods of the Middle Ages. Yeah, and you've seen the knights with the people in the Olympic jokes. It is sick. The Santa Hermandad of Spain, the Vehmgericht of Germany, the Carbonari of Italy, down to the Red Republican conclaves of France, and the trade unions of England, where Dave Prentice is now on the court of the Bank of England, issuing the money but will not give any pay rise to any of his members for 7 years, and till I chase them into the corner. And the odd fellow and know nothingism of the United States. Do you get it? The know nothings are the people like Harpo Marx, who see no evil, hear no evil, and speak no evil. Yeah? The motto for my technician, the magician at the University of Otago, which is Otsego in the story about the culling of the American Indians. Yeah? The number and power of such associations, all of them are secret societies, has increased until we may safely regard them as coextensive. Yeah, that's a philosophical word that I do not understand. As coextensive, where did we leave it behind? As coextensive with the civilized world, they have grown with the growth of society, and though not as dazzling to the imaginations of men as in the more primeval and credulous ages, they are still potent instruments of good and evil, embracing, as they do, multitudes of disciplines taken out of every rank and condition of human existence. If their members were numbered, we have no doubt that the figures of the computation would extend into the millions. Yeah, but it's a lot lower when you look for the cash. A certain uniformity of character pervades these associations in the midst, however, of a very marked and consubstantial comes up in the religious sermons now. I don't know what the hell that is either. And I don't know whether or not there is a hell, but loads of people deserve to be there. Okay? The principle of secrecy they all have in common, and this implies also the use of symbols or mystic signs and the practice of hidden ceremonies, but their objects, both in the respect to the persons comprised in each fraternity and the world outside, differ as widely as the circumstances of place or time under which they exist, and range from a simple exercise of good feeling or charity to the charity. Yeah, that's the joke about charity and the stealing of everything that the world's civilization could share with its poor nations, and with the South Pacific and with North Korea, and they could let them have the ownership of that place back, yet without putting in a dictator who's entirely elected in an oligarchy appointed by the Western countries and the G8 to the inculcation of a profounder philosophy, the overthrow of empires and the reconstruction of society. This was written in 1855. A controversy exists among learned men as to the origin and purpose of the ancient mysteries, which some regard as simple political devices designed to impress the prevailing spontaneous religious faith. I think you understand the gravity of that, as does Mr. Paterson, with one T, who's a very devout follower as long as it gets him cheap publicity. He did not even know the name of his MP when I met him. Yeah, more deeply upon the minds of the initiated by imposing ceremonies and artistic effects, while others see in them profound institutions founded by great and good men for the deliberate end of conveying to those who were worthy to receive them the recondite doctrines of a pure morality and a divine science. Yeah, right up the arse. The latter view, introduced mainly by Plutarch and the later Platonists, elaborately insisted upon by Warburton, the Welsh rugby captain. Yeah, in that storehouse of erudition, the divine legation, and largely illustrated by the more modern works of Saint Croix, yeah, in French, and Cruiser, and that's the cruise man in the Hollywood jokes, and Herman in German, has predominated up to a very recent period when more accurate historical inquests and a more scientific view of history are thought to have dismissed it, along with the philosophical contents of the early myths. Yeah, that's the Garden of Eden, now the Yemen jokes. But it is certainly clear that these mysteries, if not intended to impart an esoteric wisdom superior to that of the common people, yeah, that's the 7 billion people that are impoverished and are eternally in fear and never have a life, because of the philosophers' dominance of society and their slaves in the false news sector, and John Paterson's ignorance of the brutalisation of Southeast Asia, and the leadership team did yet shadow forth important moral truth. Remember, they met in Nottingham this week, the know-nothings. A larger meaning, astronomical, metaphysical and theosophic, has doubtless been given to them by the allegorizing tendencies of later times than they originally bore, but the idea of purification, of the surrender of vices and growth in virtue, is more or less involved in all. Isn't that comforting? Written in the 1850s. In no other way can we account for the stronghold he took on the feelings of the initiated and the satisfaction and peace which they often gave unquestionably to their consciences. That's the inner feelings, the satisfaction and peace. Yet they actually quote that. Whatever may be the truth in respect to the mysteries, we are left in no doubt as to the general designs of the secret. There's the foot-sucking notes. Yeah, they're in Latin, they're in German, they're in about the mystery of paganism, when the sun god was allowed to prevail and has suddenly popped out from behind the cloud. Right then, the next bit takes you into the Germanic religious frauds, and it is not pretty at all, because it's fucking ESSEN, and all the stories about the takeover of the hotels across Britain and the Schloss chain out of ESSEN. It's the religious fraud, and I'm going to tell you about it in ever so posh words, because I'm just reading this from a philosopher that we're not allowed to know the idea of unless you're in the secret society that he writes from, instituted by distinguished men such as the schools of Pythagoras, or of those still larger fraternities like the Essens. Yeah, the Essens. I've got relatives and friends called the Essens. And they talk to me a lot now because they know that I'm a very knowledgeable person. The Templars, the Freemasons, the Rosicrucians, etc., which were organised with the express purpose of moral and social reform. Yet the EU won the Peace Prize recently. Nothing changes, as John Paterson acknowledges, all over the rest of the brutalised globe, and the stories are just as sick. The sage of Samos, though he concealed his principal doctrines in a nimbus of words, or under a seal of inviolable silence, openly avowed his objects to be scientific instruction, moral culture, social communion, and political change. We're on the verge of the election. His disciples were taught both speculative tenets and positive science, and while collected in a special community, were yet induced to operate on the interests of society at large. The constituent principles of his academy were the principles which he wished to see carried out in the government of a nation, which is why I reminded you that the US anthem, like the British anthem, is a declaration that they are better than the one true God, if there is only one true God, and that in the British case that they will cheat and steal from their enemies and they will do it using dirty tricks, and all of it is in the lyrics of those massively powerful nations that are the transatlantic elites and the posh people. Yeah, and the body of instruction was a propaganda of new political and social ideas. Muller, oh yeah, the Miller joke again, in his masterly work on the Dorians and the ageing that you see in John Paterson's eyes since he began to cover up the truths that I tell, yeah, and the Dorians and the ageing that you see in the politicians just before they croak in the news that they no longer release, contends that the aim of Pythagoras was to exhibit an ideal of a Dorian state, but a better statement of his leading thought would be that he wished to show by a living example how the state and the individual might both reflect the harmonious order by which the universe was regulated and sustained before the messiahs popped up, and then they become the mother and the son of God. And the gods get a little bit ballistic like that, but today they are quite philosophical in their approach to life, because the approach to life as we have made it obligatory is quite twisted and ever so posh and sophisticated, but the world is eternally in conflict. The ESSENs were a body of contemplative oh God. No, it's not going to let me scroll. Oh, the ESSENs were a body of contemplative religionists supposed to have taken their rise in Judea about the time of the Maccabees. That is the man on the chariot, I forget what his name is, and this is the launch of Judaism. And Charlton Heston from the gun lobby driving the chariots around in the stadium, controlling the minds of the masses about the time of the Maccabees, and whose name is referred to the ESSEN, a jewelled plate containing the precious stones worn by the Jewish high priest. De Quincey, however, in a brilliant and ingenious essay, contends that this was the name of the earlier Christians, adopted with a view to avoid persecution. So the Essen in Germany that we all are aware of is actually the launch of Christianity, and I've got no idea where in the world it actually is at that time, because they're not very expansive and all of the words are beyond my comprehension. De Quincey, however, in a brilliant and ingenious essay, contends that this was the name of the earlier Christians, adopted with a view to avoid persecution and to enable them to propagate the new religion with more security and effect. That was the cause that J Paterson was campaigning on a few weeks ago, when he said that the Christians were still being persecuted by the Jews, and I gave him a scolding and I said I will not have a part of that, because I do not want to pull people apart and to make them wary and to spark revolutions and more violence across the brutalised globe. John keeps going down his relatively narrow and quite twisted path. His argument is not satisfactory altogether, or rather it is not inconsistent with the supposition of the obscure anti-Christian existence of such a sect and of its subsequent merger in the private assemblies of the converted Jews. It's the Piso story all over again and written by the elites in America, all of whom understand the Christianity fraud and who its authors are, and how Fox News are eternally obliged to cover it up. Yet it is remarkable, as he states, that the New Testament nowhere speaks of the Essens. Because it's officially a secret that the Europeans were involved in any of the holy stories, particularly before conversion occurred. And they were portrayed as pagans even in the Roman Empire when they refused to make the deal with the Romans. And that's the Gladiator films. And the whole of it is a piss take about the slaves having any life at all. But they are very useful in the militias to keep the numbers down. It's locked. Research sur les mystères du paganisme, symbolique and mythologie des alten Völker. That's the Germans, the pagans in the Gladiator movie. De mythologie grécorum en Kisamia. It's ever so complicated for a simple person. Yeah. And they will not let me scroll down now. The breach of justice in my own living room. Because we've gotten on to the religious topic. Do you remember how Jim Fetzer reacted? And do you remember how Jim Fetzer and Greg Hallett used to laugh about the big ear stories and the whit-a-woo of the owl? Yeah, they're investigative journalists and they're a wee bit dodgy in retrospect. But their jingo and their language I could entirely understand, and it was sensational, and a lot of it was true, because Fox News got panicky when I told the story about the illegitimate royals again, and the panic is still in their every eye and their every cover-up. Right then, no, it's not going to let me scroll. Isn't that tragic? Can you see me pressing the button? And we've gotten to the bottom of the page. There's the footnotes, but they won't let me go down to the oh, thank you. I'm not very sure who runs my surveillance team, but I know that the local council are involved, and thank you to them for keeping me safe thus far, even when I hit on the financial crimes of the local social landlords in the dukedom and the duchessdom. I don't know what the posh word is for the duchessdom. Next. It's ever so flowery. Symbolique and mythology des alten Volker. Yeah, the Volker stuff is about banking regulation. Yeah, banking regulation in inverted commas, with piss artists right at the top of every food chain. And we're likely to get 2 pages at the same time because we're on the religion. So the last word was im-something. Oh. I could play you some music again. Shall we do that until it changes? Oh no, I've shut the music down so the computer would not lock on me. When I read this the other day, the sun was pouring into everybody's living room all over the Borders region, and the temperature spiked quite amazingly, because it is about the philosophical doctrine that drives the world to war all of the time, and all of the politicians and all of the religious clerics live a life in sin. Yeah, I do not know how any of them live with themselves. So you've seen me doing my best to get that to go forward. I want you to look this up for yourself, and if you're an ordinary simple person and you're unemployable, you're short of funds, and the only thing that your kids can contemplate is a life in the militias, please talk to them quickly and tell them where they need to turn their guns. Yet you saw the pinstripes in the Bob Hope Bing Crosby pale face film. It is just not funny, and all of the pagans and the red-faced people are dead. Yeah, and the Scotsmen think it's really funny as long as you get your trickle down for the whiskey and the haggis. Yeah, and to recite those wonderful romantic poems of Rabbie Burns, and the Shakespearean stuff is just as twisted. And there's a law enforcer in Rothschild Yellow. Yeah. So nothing much happening. Let's try again. Keep the thing down this time. Next page. and the people who are locally responsible for this are 2015 Cornell University Library, and we've got contact details for them, but this is my surveillance team. Yeah, and I'm going to have to shut down some other pages to try and loosen this one up. So there's the Cornell University site that we were looking at when the computer was functional, and this yeah, my empty threats, maybe listened to sometimes, but we'll jump 3 or 4 pages all at once, and we'll need to go back to find the religious fraud, which none of them are prepared to talk about, until John Paterson developed his compassionate side and then suddenly dropped it again because he got an order from upstairs with a smoking gun pointing at him. Thank to you from the people from formerly corrupted Holland for talking to me in the streets, but me taking the risks to try and get society back to decency and safety. Oh, so we've ended up on the right page. Disputed doctrines. Christ during his ministry in Palestine is brought into contact with all known orders of men. Yeah, that's Palestine that creates all sorts of havoc in the political justice sector now. Yeah, and the conscripts on Facebook that follow that and get rant about it relentlessly are massive, and they do not understand at all that the whole of the Holy Land's joke is a massive genocide for all of human history. Christ during his ministry in Palestine is brought into contact with all known orders of men, scribes and doctors. Yeah, everything's a fraud. Sadducees and Pharisee, Herodians and followers of the Baptist, Roman officers, insolent with authority, tax gatherers, the pariahs of the land, Galileans. Yeah, that was St. Paul, by the way, the tax gatherers, the pariahs of the land. And he had to pause for a wee bit before he was able to write without having to crucify people from the Jewish nation. Yeah, it is really tragic that the whole world swallows this without contention, and a lot of them are allowed then to call themselves philosophers or theologians. Yeah, where was I? The pariahs of the land, that's the tax gatherers, Galileans, the most undervalued of the Jews, Samaritans, hostile to the very name of Jew, rich men. That's what I was trying to talk John Paterson out of a couple of weeks ago. Yeah, the attacks by the Zionists on the Christians, they're all in the same fucking team as John Paterson with one T, unless he's thicker than I took him for. Rich men clothed in purple and poor men fishing for their daily bread. The loaves and fishes joke again, the happy and those that sit in darkness, wedding parties and funeral parties, solitaries among hills or seashores, and multitudes that could be counted. It's getting poetic again, isn't it? Mighty cities and hamlets, the most obscure golden Sanhedrins, and the glorious temple where he spoke to myriads of the worshippers, and lone corners where he stood in conference with a single contrite heart. Remember that all of these jokers know that the whole story is a fraud. From its inception in the underworld in Herculaneum near Naples, which is actually called Naples now, that's the Villa Papyri. Yeah, just before Vesuvius erupted onto it, when they began to trickle the stories out. And that is mentioned further down. They know the whole thing, but it's ever so posh and funny if you're able not to share it and your knowledge of it with the whole of the persecuted world. Where did we get to? And the ESSEN bit I only learned from this document, yeah, because they're ever so careful about disseminating stuff that could bring them to their knees as being traitors and religious heretics and a total treasonous actions against the world's one true gods in the skies. One has no idea how many there are. but I do know that they are on our side, and the Vesuvius incident was entirely deserved. Right. So, a contrite heart. This is Jesus that never existed with the contrite heart. Yet under none of these circumstances do we hear of any interview between him and the Essens. Yeah, I failed to make my interview last night, and I've had to unfriend the people because they went ballistic with me, like J Paterson's friend did 2 nights before when I declared that I was going to meet with this woman in America, and when I might talk about the crimes of Mrs. Thatcher, and they went ballistic and they came into the conversation uninvited and they kept using the C word, and then they called me a shill and they cut me off. And the Amy's controller did exactly the same thing today, because I was talking about not knowing that the Central Bank for America was in Minesota, where they come from. That's the Rothschild owned central bank, and you should see the number of troops that went from Minesota into Iraq. 11,000 from that tiny province in America, state rather. They are mentioned by none of his biographers. This is the Jesus story and the links of the Germans in the Essen region. Their name does not occur in the Acts of the Apostles. St. Peter, St. James and St. Paul, all of them fraudsters, all of them invented by the Pisos, and St. Peter is the man in the Coldplay song. Yeah, I know St. Peter won't call my name for reasons I am unprepared to explain. That's the scholar in ancient history called Christopher Martin that knows that there was no Jesus Christ, and that's why he knows those lyrics and sings them. He sings the lyrics about lights guiding the Jews home, and all of them are on the same profiteering and genocidal side. And nothing ever changes, as my J Paterson with 1 T keeps confirming in every interview we make. I'm going to enforce change on them for decency, so the world can be taken to civilization. Okay, St. Paul, he's the tax collector. Never allude to them. And the apocalypse of St. John is equally silent. I'm not sure what that means. Yeah, but the parish church in the Church of Scotland where my son was christened was St. John's, but they've changed it now to Kelso North, because they're really nervous about the authenticity of the stories and my revelations. But thank you to the people who are thinkers in that church for looking into your conscience and being supportive, and none of you are prepared to kill me thus far. Again, as the same writer is at pains to indicate, there was a singular resemblance between both the doctrine of the Essens and those of the earlier Christians, and their practical, moral as well as religious observances, their hospitality, their anti-Lucan, that's the taxi driver. I did not know that he had an auntie, but he drives the taxi in Sarajevo for a laugh after he's killed the housemaid in London, and the whole of these stories are a huge joke to the perpetrators of the crime and the people who take the profits from it. Their hospitality, their anti-Lucan worship, their aversion to marriage, their scrupulosity as to oaths, their faithfulness to friends and love of peace, their contempt of pain and death, their white robes, their meals, their silence and gravity, and above all, their lofty and spiritual relations, principles, seem but mere echoes of the primitive economy of the Christians, as it is declared to us in the apostolical constitutions. But whether the Essens were Christians or not, we have every reason to infer that the Christians were at first a secret society. There's a shock for me. Look up Faking the New Testament on my website and you will see all of the horrible facts and all of the slutty jokes about the Christian myths and all of the things that they laugh at, including Easter, the launch of the Rolling Stones, the Easter egg jokes, all of the things about the horses, the hippos, and all of the things about the mullers turning the bones to flour, and the persecution of 32,000 virgins if you're allowed to fight for the one true God. It is sick, sick, sick. But it does save us, as my 4-year-old Dave Allen did point out, that we can sin as much as we like, because Christ has saved us, and he's flattened any conscience that the human race might ever have about what they've done to the world. They cherished a secret discipline and doctrine which only the initiated were allowed to know. Yeah, that's the Pope. That's why the Pope writes the stories about King Arthur for a laugh, like the output from the Cooper man that writes about the genocide of the American Indians. I keep forgetting his name that I forgot already. Neander and Mosheim, for certain reasons, pass lightly over the fact, which is abundantly established by pagan and Christian authorities. Their rites were celebrated in secret and guarded from profane eyes with jealous vigilance. That's the Mithraeum underworld. Yeah, it's hell in Paris for a laugh, because they invented hell too, and purgatory, and all of the Islamic religions, and all of the Indian religions, and everything is a stitch up for profit. That's not the posh writers. I think you can tell the bits that I'm commenting on. A peculiar costume of the order was customary on certain solemn occasions, yet we celebrate the death of Jesus, our greatest icon, and we eat the eggs until we cannot be getting into the ambulance, even when we have the following on cardiovascular accident. As when baptism was administered to the, what are the footnotes, use and abuse of Freemasonry, London, 1783, candidates and secret signs of recognition were used among the members, in order that the dispensers of the fraternal charities might know to whom to administer relief, and that travellers sojourning in their strange countries might discern their true friends. That's the Red Cross with the gold bricks in the back. The origin of Freemasonry is lost in the mist of the ages, or rather in the mists of words, which learned men are apt to throw about exceedingly remote and indefinite period of time. Some trace it to the Collegia Fabrorium of Rome. That's a posh university, one assumes, and others to King Solomon, while Captain George Smith of the Royal Artillery at Woolwich, where I got my PhD, and the fraudster at the HSBC got somebody's head cut off in the false news, but the Met Police would not talk to me about it. The sun's gone in. Cuts the question short, or long rather, by making it Coval. That's an E with an acute or something over it, which I don't understand, because this is really elite profiteering with the creation of the globe. Yeah, that's the joke about the sun coming up at the beginning of the American national anthem, when the sovereign says he raised on Masonic principles the beauteous globe. Yeah, so it's built by the Masons, not by the gods in the sky. Yeah, they're much more philosophical today, and I think that they're relieved that after all this time it's taken me to prepare this, that I'm actually getting the news out at long last. Okay? The Masonic principles of the beauteous globe, etc., etc. But as a society, the Masons first attracted attention during the Middle Ages, when the trades began to be incorporated as the Corporation of Architects. Ah, now get the picture. That's Hitler and what he wanted to be before he was retrained at Tavistock, which J Paterson totally understands, and is part of the minor fraud which has already been released. But they must not release the religious secrets under any circumstances, because it would make them all look like cheap shot thieves. because they were concerned in the structure of those grand religious edifices which have come down to us under the name of cathedrals, and all of those things need stone roofs to protect themselves from the gods. The sun has dipped again transiently. Yeah. The cathedrals at first assumed a leading and conspicuous position, confining their mysteries to the secrets of the craft. They were afterwards extended to scientific principles as the religious tenets. Yeah, the people are ever so insightful as to what the universal gods are, and all of them know what to call them and what their gender is, and they know their mum. Yeah, and they know that their son was down here, and Dave Allen saw him hanging on the cross behind the nuns. Protected by charters from the clerical and secular, this is protected by law enforcement, protected by charters from the clerical and secular powers, and composed of members selected out of all the nations of Europe, they grew into great power, and dropping their technical character, came at last to be mere social and charitable societies, having for their motto brotherly love, relief and truth, and interesting themselves in the establishment of schools. Yeah, and universities and colleges if you're a black man or an Indian, the extension of hospitality and the practice of a pure morality, the conversion of the world to the principles of social equality and freedom has always been imputed to them as a main design for their organisation by the despots in the church or the state. Those are the puppets. The money lenders are the power brokers, and they're really dangerous. Yeah, and nothing ever changes, as J Paterson acknowledges, and he acknowledges also the illegitimacy of the monarchy and the illegitimacy of the central banking fraud, but he still tries to persecute North Korea today, who have found from time to time anathematized or persecuted them. Anathema, that means that it makes them look evil. Like the 8 million Jews that were crucified in the first 150 years of Christianity, in inverted commas. Whether this comprehensive scheme was cherished by the Freemasons or not, it was confessedly an object with the secret order of the Illuminati. Now I'd better not talk about this, because it turns off objective people like Gordon Bowden, which arose in Germany previous to the French Revolution. All of those conflicts kill millions of people, and all of them are poor, and which, as revived by that arch quack and mystagogue Count Cagliostro, had, according to Louis Blanc, a great deal to do with the preparation, use and abuse of Freemasonry, London 1783. Right then, will it let us change the page? Oh. I hope the big words are not confusing you, and that you're seeing the bigger picture. Yet the arch quacks now own the whole world and all of its issuance of money on every country on the globe, and the doctors persecute the healthy people by using drugs even when the people are healthy, and that's how they get 40% of their pay. I don't know who Louis Blanc was, but I've told you all about the fantastical stories and the treason that occurs in France all of the time, and the road to ruin jokes. Right then, it's ever so troublesome just turning the page. Let me try an experiment of closing that page down now. And this is an attempt to speed things up, like the invention of the atom bomb for these bastards. Yeah, that was done in America using the rocket scientists and the physicists from Heidelberg and Göttingen in Germany, where some of the ESSEN movement were the secret societies in the early days of Christianity. And I failed to mention yesterday that the Hmong people are acknowledged as being now one of the main inhabitants in the Minesota region where the central bank is. The Hmong people were the double agents and the traitors who sold their country in the Vietnam War so that LBJ and his successors could take over. Oh, they've changed the page. Isn't that convenient when we change the topic? Right then. Oh no, sorry, this is the Putnam text. So if I shut that down, then we should be able to get back to Putnam's monthly. And the computer should be a little bit quicker, but I'm really sorry that I'm not allowed to read this to you promptly. Yeah, because they're ever so nervous. It's blasphemy, it's treason, it is grand larceny, it is genocide, it is religious martyrdom. Everything that they do is a crime against the people and the innocents. And it's called Putnam's Monthly, but no one knows that until this week. Putnam is a really famous name. It's going to become really infamous really soon, and as I said in the earlier video, I don't know how Lord Putnam lives with himself. He's a civilized and educated man, but he lives his whole life for genocide for profit and the jokes that ensue. So, silly old me, I've done the simple thing and I've locked up all of the computer now and we're not even on the page we need to be, but I hope I've shown you how to find it. Journals, Putnam's Monthly, 1853 to 1870 is the time period that we're covering here, and when I discovered that I was shocked. Yeah, because it interlocks with all of the war crimes in Gallipoli, all of the World War I scams, all of the Time Team scams, and all of those come out of Oxford, Cambridge, Heidelberg, Göttingen, Georgetown, yeah, Princeton, all of the posh universities all around the globe. And the financial services crimes are just as massive now, and it is a massive burden for the world's people because our economy globally is fucked by the know-nothings. Yeah, they claim that it is an accident, it's a fiscal cliff, that the lemmings, yeah, which they call the meerkats, because that's the market joke, they come off the fiscal cliff, and at the bottom of the cliff you have all of the profiteers with their suitcases open because they know it's going to happen. Yeah, but they don't like to speak about it. That's why they met in Nottingham this week. And the Notting Hill joke is just as vicious. It unites criminals all around the world through the networks that we've described, through the man that is the Notting Hill owner, the Scott families, and all of their links to my old colleagues in New Zealand and the Auckland Trust. Yeah, that's Dr. Jones and his links to the Arabs and the people that he plays bridge with. Omar Sharif. Yeah, it's a massive stitch up, and the linkages to those colleges and those universities and those elite authors are vicious. Yeah, Fenimore Cooper gets all of his inspiration from Walter Scott and the novels of the French Romantics, and they're about killing the American Indians and then giving them a reputation as rapists and murderers in their own country, which was taken over by the white man. And that's the pale face joke. Right. I don't know how we can get back. Oh, the know-nothings. Louis Blanc's history. Right, the Illuminati with the revolutionary societies in Europe and with many of our own secret charitable societies. Have we done this bit? Oh no, this is the bit with GAZZER in it. Remember I told you about GAZZER at Newcastle Football Club? Everybody is picked to cover up the great thieves of our world. So let's go back to the top and start off where we finished off. Can't remember what that was. This is the Illuminati, founded in 1776 by Adam Weishaupt, a professor of law. Yeah, that's John Lamont's friends. I'm going to put John Lamont's video again up on Facebook because I've declared that Michael Moore runs an assassination bureau out of Glasgow, but I've got massive crimes to pin on a Julian Lamont, and we're on the eve of the election, and I believe that the citizens in the election have the right to know what their leaders do and how the Scots are involved in the laundering of money all across the globe, and the woman who's the Duchess in the Scott dynasty is the running of the pension fund as a massive Ponzi scheme so she can treat her employees badly. Yeah, and all of them are local people. Founded in 1776 by Adam Weishaupt, a professor of law at Ingolstadt, it soon spread over Europe and sent a shiver through all the established governments. Yet there was a horrible financial crash in Wisconsin in 1857, and it's the same template every time. A student of Pythagoras and the Rosicrucians, Weishaupt's primary object appears to have been to organise a movement against the Jesuits. That's the Pope is a Jesuit. The new Pope is one of the Jesuit popes, like the man Colvenbach that Peter Eyre told me about, and he brutalised the Lebanon and Libya. Yeah, that's Colvenbach. All of them are knights of Malta, and all of them are friends of Jimmy Savile and the royal family. And that's St Ignatius, who started all of that, and they're genocidal already at that time in Christianity's history, with whom he had a long and sore quarrel. John Parsons not speaking to me, but they're ballistically attacking them, and I think that they're in a really dangerous area, and that I will be looked after by a greater power. But I'm not sure of anything, which is why I'm so God-fearing. A Republican. So this is the Jesuits, but he was not slow in giving his order a cosmopolitan extension, a Republican, a moralist and a scholar. Like all of the public schoolboys all over the globe, he sought to extend republicanism, morality and learning to the whole of the human family. In order to do this more effectively, right up the rear, he resorted to the known influences of decorations, symbolic initiations, etc., which impress the popular imagination and heart. That's the hearts and minds concept. By the whole sole attraction of mystery, by the single power of association, to submit to one will and to animate with the same breath thousands of men in every country of the globe, to make entirely new beings of these men by a slow and progressive education. That's their biggest mistake. Yeah, that's their biggest mistake. To render them obedient to madness, to death, to invisible and unknown leaders. The secret society everywhere. All of the G8 meetings are held behind locked doors. Same in Davos. The Sherpas get massive bungs to be traitors in the civil service to their countries, to weigh secretly with such a legion upon courts, to envelop sovereigns, to direct governments at their pleasure, and to lead Europe to that point that every superstition should be annihilated in the fire pans after you've shaved their head. An annihila is a Dutch goddess. Not many people know that unless you're a scholar and a simple person like me. Every monarchy abated every privilege of birth declared unjust. This is the monarchy that's been illegitimate for 170 years. The very right of property abolished and the equality of the first Christians proclaimed.
freedom. Yeah, and all of them get killed in the Great Conlicts, regardless of whether they're Christians or Jews or Gentiles or Indian people conscripted from distant continents. Such was the gigantic plan of the founder of the Illuminati. He appeared to, at a time most favourable to the adoption of hidden practices. The German mind was agitated with wonders and novelties. This is the Grimm brothers, yeah, and leading the rats to their deaths. A curate named Gassner, who exorcised devils and cured the sick by simple formulas, counted almost 1 million adherents. At Leipzig, immense crowds gathered on the public square to see the ghost of the magician Scoffer. This is like the Christian saints carrying their heads 10 kilometres across Paris until they get to the massive cathedral that is named after them, and the catwalk is built on the heads of the beheaded people. Yeah, that's the poor people in the revolution. Numerous interpretations in the mystic book of the Revelations were circulated, and the Queen of Prussia and her women themselves maintained that they had seen the White Lady. That's the Lourdes joke. I used to love the movies because I'm a simpleton and I'm an altar boy at that time in my life, and I believed the whole story. And I get guilt all the time. Thus, sensibility to the marvellous was widely spread around by the media. Oh no, it doesn't say that. Awake, and thus Weishaupt attracted the simple by their hopes and fears, and the great by their love of power. Counts, dukes and noblemen of all grades became his disciples, and a perfect fanaticism in the cause of N something. Louis Blanc's History of the French Revolution. Yeah, all of the elites flee, and all of them are put in safe houses all across Britain. And that's maybe why they used the name of the Welsh rugby captain, because they had one of them in Wales, one of them in Northampton, and one of them in Yellow and Black Melrose. When the order was formally suppressed amid storms of rage and conflict by the King of Bavaria. Yeah, that's the Innsbruck place where Arnie Schwarzenegger fled from to power, a greater power in America. Yeah, that's the Innsbruck place, the birthplace of Jesus, where there was no room at the inn, and where the Austrian Navy sailed from. It's fucking landlocked. But Cagliostro took up its rent and dissevered mantle, and in that wonderful compound of mesmerism, legerdemain, magique, exorcism and folly by which he was as the Grand Copter. Yeah, that's the Copsey Home joke, just beyond Langham. Yeah, where someone was run down by a massive Land Rover, but the police never investigated the crime, and their police station has since closed, which is the fascist dream. This is Goethe, the man who shoots from his balcony in the Schindler's List film. Yeah, Goethe. They have the gall to make a joke about that and the genocide of everybody, and it wins an Oscar, and I've got the Schindler's director numbers, and the Schindlers that don't have a C in the word are even more sinister. Has finally ridiculed, humbugged the visionaries and simpletons of France, restored to the order to more than its pristine glory. The story of the diamond necklace with which his impostures were connected has gone to the ends of the earth, but his own end was in the castle of St. Leo. That's the Lion of Judah laugh again. Yet in the brutalisation of Ethiopia, right next door to the river Pishon. Yeah, the Piso joke and the pish on the people of the world by the elite's belly laugh. On the Adriatic, where he languished for 3 years in the horrible pits of a dungeon, and then gave up the ghost in 1795. We have no space now to speak of the Santa.